In the last session, I covered the basics of archiving. And so I took an NSDictionary, I saved it to a file, took it back out of a file using NSKeyedArchiver and Unarchiver, and displayed some data. That will work for any of the predefined data types using arrays and using NSDictionary. However, it will not work for custom objects, the ones that you've created using classes, unless you use the NSCoding protocol, which is what I'm going to talk about today. So I've created a new project. I've included the person.h and person.m that I used in a previous course. The person.h is pretty simple. I've got a few extra properties here: age, name, height, gender. Init with name, get gender. In the person.m, synthesize those: init with name, get gender, description. Pretty basic. Now, there's a few changes that I'm going to have to make here. First of all, I have to implement the protocol. And so in the .h, I've got to specify the protocol. And this is the NSCoding protocol. And that's all I have to do there. Next, in the person.m, I have to include two new methods. And as you see, we have a warning because we have an incomplete implementation because of the protocol. I'm going to add a couple constants. And I'll define an age key to be age, and I'll define a name key to be at name, and define a height key to be at height, and define a gender key. This will reduce the chance of having typos. So if you had a lot of these, it'd be a very good idea. Now, what I want to do next is I want to start implementing these selectors. So ID, init with coder. And like all of the inits, I want to do self is equal to super init. And then I want to check to make sure that self was correctly implemented. And I'll say age is equal to a decoder, decode. Now, when we do this decode, we want to specify exactly which data type. And in the age is an int, so we'll use decode int for key. And I'm going to use the age key. And name is equal to a decoder. And the name is a string, so we'll decode object. Decode object for key. And I'm going to use the name key. Next, height is equal to a decoder. Decode. Now, height was a float, so we want float for key. We'll do the height key. And lastly, gender is equal to a decoder, decode. Now, gender was a character, and characters are equivalent to ints, to small ints. All I have to do is set it as an integer. Gender key. And save it. And the last thing I have to do is I have to return self. And that's good for the init with coder. The next thing is the encode with coder. I'll say a coder, encode. I have to specify the exact type as well. So int, and I'll want to select self dot age for key, and the age key again, and a coder, encode. Now this one is going to be for the name, and so I want a string, which is an object. And so I want to encode object. For key, self dot name, and the key will be name key. And once again, for the next one, encode. Now this one's for the height, which is float. Encode float, self dot height. For key, height key. And lastly, we want the gender. Coder, encode, and we did this as an integer because it's a character. Self.gender. And we want to use the gender key. And that's all we have to do there. I'll save that. We are now properly implementing the NSCoding protocol for person. Next, go back to the view controller. Now, the first thing we want to do is import the person class. Person.h. Great. And we're going to create a brand new array. And for the fun of it, I'm going to use the NSMutable array. I'm going to make an array called people equal to NSMutable array alloc init, and let's add a few people. So people add object person alloc init with name, and the first person I'll add will be Jane. Age 33, height 5'4", and a gender of female. And let's add a couple more people. Person alloc init with name, and we'll call this person Bob. Age 26, height 5.75, which would be 5'9", and make the gender male, and let's add another person. Add object person alloc init with name, and we'll make this Mary. Make her 39 with a height of 5'6" and gender of female. Good. Next thing we want to do is we want to get ready to archive this. So we're going to use the same KeyedArchiver, but we're going to create an NSMutableData, and we're going to fill that with the array and then archive that. So we'll declare NSMutableData pointer data, make it equal to NSMutableData alloc init, and we'll get an NSKeyedArchiver, just call it arc, equal to NSKeyedArchiver alloc, and I'm going to init for writing with mutable data, and I'm just going to set this to data. Next thing I'll want to do is I want to use the NSKeyedArchiver to encode an object, and I'm going to use people and just give it a key of people. And what you have to do after you've encoded is you always have to finish encoding. Okay, so that's encoded it. Now, at this point in time, we could write this to a file. In this case, though, I'm just going to use this data, which is encoded, and I'm going to decode it. I'm going to skip the step of saving it to a file. So I'm now going to create another NSMutable array. I'll just call it other people, and make it equal to NSMutable array alloc init, and let's fill it. NSKeyed Unarchiver unarch NSKeyed Unarchiver. Now I've got to allocate some space for it, and init for reading with data. And I'm just going to use data again because we're reading from that data. And I'll make other people equal to the Unarchiver decode object for key. And I'm going to use the people key, which I used before. So you can use strings for the keys, or you can define strings, string constants like I did in the last session. And now we want to unarchive and finish decoding. So now I'll make sure this actually worked. And just use fast enumeration, person pointer p in other people, and nslog %@ p. Save it and run it. And it worked. So I now see Jane, Bob, and Mary. So to recap, we created an NSMutable array, added some people, we created an NSMutable data and an archiver, and we archived the data using the archiver into data. After that, we created a new array and we unarchived it into the new array. And so we could have used this to save to a file. You could use this to send across a service. In the next session, we're going to look at encoding data into XML.